Got it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for this evening, along with fellow board members Beth Sturry and Jennifer Falsing in the Zoom room. So welcome, everybody. If you haven't already, and you're obviously, if you're joining us for the very first time, please feel free to use the meeting chat room and say hello to our guest Diana this evening. Let her know how you identify in the adoption constellation and where you're from. And before we introduce our guests, we do have a couple of housekeeping items. So when you guys are ready. Okay, we want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group or on our Facebook and our YouTube channel. So Diana's replay will be on the Adoption Happy Hour Facebook private group. If you don't follow us there, please do that. So that's where her replay will be. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions and comments in chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or dial the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988.
Okay. We have regularly scheduled programming here at NAAP. We have happy hour on the first and third Friday night of each month. We are in our 5th year of bringing happy hour guests to the adoption community. The other programs that we have are a reunion support group hosted by Dr. Joyce, Putting Yourself Together After Reunion. They meet the 2nd or 3rd Tuesday of each month, and it is next Tuesday when they will be meeting in June. And then we also have First Families, Birth Parents Journeying Together. Amy Seek is facilitating that group, and they meet monthly on the 2nd Thursday of the month. And that would be next week also, I believe. Is that right, Jen? I think so. And then we close out each month with Self-Love Essentials for the Adoption Constellation, and that is facilitated by Danielle Gaudet, and that group meets on the last Thursday of the month. So most weeks you can find some type of NAAP programming going on. And while we're talking programming, I'm going to go ahead and show you our next happy hour guest. June 21st, 2 weeks from tonight, we will have our 2nd June happy hour, and Dr. Liz DeBetta will be joining Marcie that night for a program entitled Migrating Toward Wholeness and Healing. So that will be our next happy hour. And that's all I have.
Okay, Jen, you have any announcements? Anything you want to share? Okay.
Nope.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome our guest, our special guest this evening, Diana Kayla Hochberg. And she's been on Happy Hour for how many? You've been following us for what, a couple of years, haven't you? Yeah, take yourself off mute, Diana, for just a second, please. Yeah, go ahead and do that. But yeah, she's been with us for quite some time, and she's also joined us at Summit. So 2 years. Yeah, you've been to Summit 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years I went to Summit.
Yeah. So we're real excited to have you. I wanted you on to share your story and let others know about your journey. So let me share just a little bit about Diana with all of you. She is an accomplished photographer with over 25 years of experience in management and as an educator. Her life is a testament of the power of self-discovery and perseverance. She was born in Montreal, Canada, and raised in New York, holds a bachelor's degree in education and an associate of arts degree in art history. Since 2017, she has been a member of the British Columbia Genealogical Society, as well as the National Genealogical Society. She is passionate about genealogy and helping adoptees and non-adoptees discover their family histories. She is the proud mother of her son, David, daughter-in-law, Erica, and stepdaughter Claire. She resides in Pawleys Island, South Carolina, with her brother Jesse and her Siberian cat Gatsby. So we're excited to have you join us tonight. Welcome to Adoption Happy Hour.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, great. Well, we're going to start out with, I know you have a presentation, a slideshow you'd like to share with our attendees. So just tell us a little bit about you, and then we can get into your story and your presentation.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna tell you about my life before I found out I'm an LDA, a late discovery. I was born during the baby scoop era, which is considered to have lasted from 1945 to 1970. During this time, 1.5 million pregnant women in the United States were secretly sent to maternity homes to give up their children for adoption. I later found out that in Canada, the baby scoop era referred to the post-war period from 1945 to 1988. I was among the thousands of infants sold through a black market ring in Montreal. A complex network of Quebec-based baby smugglers, lawyers, doctors, and illegal maternity home operators targeted unsuspecting Canadians and American Jewish families. I was raised in a modern Orthodox Jewish home in New York City. Our community was a vibrant mix of Jewish, Italian, and Irish families, each contributing to a rich cultural tapestry of the neighborhood. Three characteristics of our lifestyle was observing Shabbat, eating kosher, and studying the Torah. Shabbat is the Jewish Sabbath. It's the day of rest and the spiritual enrichment that begins at sundown on Friday and ends at midnight on Saturday. My father did not work on the weekends. He attended temple on Friday nights, and twice a month we all went as a family to services. We lit the Shabbat candles and we had festives. We observed all the Jewish holidays. When I was 9, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And I know it would be Ray's mother, but I didn't know anything at this time. She passed away before I was 11. At the same time, I was diagnosed with childhood scoliosis, and my dad took me to all the doctor's appointments. My mother's illness was a tragedy to our family. We started going to temple less. By the time I was 21, I had my first lobster dinner, an experience that both felt liberating, given that I had guilt, being that I was strictly kosher upbringing. Shortly after my son was born, I was ready for marriage, and I married outside of my faith, which filled me with a profound sense of Jewish guilt. If anybody's ever married out of their faith, there's a lot of guilt we can feel. However, my husband, who was Catholic, was very understanding and agreed that we could raise our children Jewish. The decision showed his love and generously made it easier for us to navigate our cultural and religious differences. 7 years later, my husband was killed in a tragic car accident. Shortly before that, I had filed for a divorce. 3 years later, in 1993, at the age of 38, a new chapter of my life began. And I was going to go into the slideshow now. Share the screen. Does everybody see it? Yes? Everybody can see it. Okay, thumbs up. Okay. This first picture is in 1993. I went to Las Vegas with my son, and this was a family friend of my father's. He also worked for the CIA. He took us out to lunch, and while we were at lunch, he suggested, "It's a shame that you lost your parents so early, and now your husband. Would you like me to help you look for your parents?" I felt sick to my stomach. Mentally, I repeated, what was this man saying? I stopped breathing for a moment. I did not believe it was coming out of his mouth. "What are you talking about?" Immediately, he looked remorseful. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say anything to upset you." I never met your biological parents. My parents were Manny and Ethel Hochberg. They were no strangers to me, but this man assumed that I knew. Adopted? I was adopted? Changed my life forever. Okay. It's supposed to go. Okay. This is my adopted parents. This is in 1965. My mother already had cancer here. And she, when you're a kid, you don't realize your parents. I had older parents, but to me, a kid, we don't realize that. So they were my parents. And this is 6 months before my mother passed away. So I wanted to share them because it's the only picture I have of me with both my adopted mother and father together. Your father, you were never adopted. After I got back from Las Vegas, my brother suggested that I notify the health department and try to get my birth certificate. So I had reached out to the New York State and I wrote them and I called, and it took a long time before I got any answers. In the meanwhile, this man, Joe Klein, I had received a package in the mail, and it was a letter inside in the binder. It was a love letter to his wife that he had, my father. And he said, "You should have told her." Well, I didn't know what that meant at the time, so I mailed him the letter. Joe lived out in Beverly Hills. The following week, Joe called me. "Diana, I knew something was up when I got the letter. I never wanted to hurt you. Your father never adopted you." What? Your biological mother refused to relinquish her rights. Ethel never knew that there was no legal adoption. So my mother who raised me did not know that there was not a legal adoption. Joe, I'm okay. I just want to know the truth. The next day, I received a letter from the New York Department of Health. Randy, my caseworker, explained that I was one of 52 cases. The first certificate showed incorrect details and multiple handwriting styles. I received another certificate with the initials DK. Randy mentioned the next one would be on the way. He said there's no adoption in the state of New York. The case is now closed. I'm fast forwarding on things. I'm giving tidbits of what went on. That's one of my first baby pictures. And tentatively now my book is called Hijacked, Beyond Borders. And I don't know if the Beyond Borders is going to stay, so I'm being very upfront, but I kind of like the Hijacked. Joe Klein and Manny Diamond were able to locate the man who actually knew my father in Montreal and actually made all the arrangements. We spoke on the phone. He was a family friend. I was not his first one, and I was not his last one. I just don't think he told everybody it was illegal. He said before he could speak to me, he needed to speak to his lawyer. He did, and he said he was way past the statute of limitations. You will not find a birth certificate listing Donna as your mother. There was a fake birth certificate that lists Manhattan General and your birth parents. There are incorrect ages for parents. Your birth certificate is fake. Donna exchanged you for college tuition, dental money, and a flight back to Vancouver. Shortly after, she wanted the baby back. And there's a lot more to the story with Mort, but I just want to give you some tidbits on this. She followed him After she went back to Vancouver, 3 months later, she showed up at his hotel in Toronto. And then after, she went to Montreal and she started college. She graduated from McGill University in 1959. I did get to meet in 1994, after I found out through a lot of research and making phone calls. Once I knew my mother's last name, I called everybody in Vancouver with the last name Koloski. SKY, SKI. I called everybody, not realizing I was speaking to my Uncle Tom. When I went to Vancouver, this was the very first picture my aunt gave me. This is my grandmother. This is my Aunt Jan. This is my Uncle Tom, Freddie, my Aunt Dot, and this is my mother, Donna. And people that know me as a kid know that I look just like her. And when I first met him, my grandmother called me Donna, and both my aunts called me Donna. Over here is one of our first visits when I met my grandmother. She did live to the age of 90, and we had made several visits. And then over here is another family picture in 1997. The only one's not in here is my other uncle and his wife, which I was very close to. Just giving you a little bit. This was all in Vancouver, BC. I decided I wanted to know more. I was researching more. So I decided I wanted to meet more in person. So I decided, let me meet this man, and he agreed. And the reason he agreed is he was afraid I had more information on him. I went up to Montreal with my son. This is Mort. This is the man that took me across the border. This is his mistress. He was married, but he always had a mistress. Her name was Andre. And this is me. It's a long time ago. He took us to a club one night, and it's the Montefiore Club. It's a private club for members. It's run by the Jewish community. We pulled up to a 3-story Victorian Greystone. Upon arrival, I was struck by the impression that transported us back to time. It reminded me of The Godfather. Rumors circulated that Meyer Lansky had also been at this club. Mort had ties to the Jewish mafia. And this was my little thing. I call him the baby broker, because I did find out he did this several times to several different women. And I've met those women. This is my mother. In 1953 in Vancouver, Canada, she was seen walking along the beach by 2 famous photojournalists, and they took her picture. 1953, you did not walk down the streets of Vancouver wearing a bikini. And this is her. My cousin did it in color just to see the difference. But I've later found out from the lady that I met here, I met this lady, that the bikini was not black and white, that it was pink polka dot bikini. And she was hoping, she signed the papers that she was 18. She was 2 months shy of her 17th birthday when these pictures were shot. Now, Ed Costco took these pictures along with, there was another photographer called, his name was Ken Honey. You might have heard the name before. The newspaper also sold that Ed, the picture came out every year after it was put in the archives till 1966. Ed recalled my mother was beautiful and she had a certain aura around her. People popped all around. It was about 22 degrees Celsius, which is 70 degrees. There were men in business suits. There were locals at the beach. Hollywood was in town the week before, he said. Marilyn Monroe. Perhaps your mother wanted to be the next starlet. She could have been the first woman photographed in a bikini in North America, but Vancouver said there would be too much controversy. So I didn't get to get that news until 1966. Like I said, the name of the title in the newspaper when it came out, we can't run that. Okay. Here it's the end. My grandmother, when I first met her on one of my first visits, had given me, onto the left side, had given me these little things in a blue envelope, along with a $50 bill. We had been, over the years, I have been in the newspaper with my son. There's been stories of my mother. Some of them are true, some of them are not true. Mort Schulman is in some of the stories. He was the baby broker. He lied to the press. I have tried to get a retraction, and I've never been able to, because that wouldn't have sold newspapers. Some of the news is wrong. Have you ever heard of fake news? We don't have such a thing as fake news, do we? But she's been in the newspaper quite a lot over the years. And every year in August, her bikini picture runs in the newspapers. It's been on tour on a famous run. I haven't been able to track it down, where it goes, the picture is one of the famous photographs that goes throughout Canada. From 2000 to 2015, I did not have any ties with my biological family in Canada. All ties were cut. My house was burglarized. I was living in Sarasota. I had threatening phone calls. They threatened the life of my son and my family. I decided to cut off all ties. In 2015, I made a decision after a little accident in my home. Something told me it was time. So I started my search with a different approach. Became unstoppable. I wanted to know the truth. I started going to Canada. These are some of the people that helped me. This was on my first 2-week journey. They were wonderful. They all wanted to help me. I found out a lot, but the one thing I hadn't been able to find is any records of school, which she does have school records, any records of my mother of existence. The only thing I was able to get was a registration of death, and just like a birth certificate, a registration of death, that's what they call it in Canada, and can also be fake. I became obsessed. My friend Steve knows how obsessed I was with it because he helped me through that part of my journey. My aunt, a month before she died, she came across in my other aunt's house in the basement Kodachrome films that belonged to my mother. They were hidden, they were wet. We didn't know if we could salvage them. We were able to salvage a certain amount, and through that, we were able to find different slides that my mother had traveled to in Europe, Cuba, Montreal, skiing, Queen Elizabeth, all over, it seemed that all over Europe, Paris, Austria. So every time we looked at these, I was trying to get, the only thing that was missing from all these slides was me. My aunts were in these slides. My grandmother was in the slides. They seemed to be a very close family. It seemed that my mother went to visit all the time. She lived in Montreal, my mom, for 10 years, but she went back to Vancouver quite frequently, I found out. And she also mailed a weekly check every time she got paid. She sent the grandmother home, her mother, my grandmother, a check. And that was nice to hear. My search continued. In the end of 2015, I decided to take a DNA test. I was totally clueless. I chose Ancestry at the time. This is just, I had made one room in my home. All the walls were totally different boards, charts, and Steve knows, all over the place. Any clues, different people I spoke to, any information, all over. I also found in the registration of death, it still didn't look right to me. I wrote the hospital. On one of my trips to Vancouver, I met a man whose father was a big donator of Vancouver Hospital. They decided to help me. It still came back that my mother was never in the hospital. You see, my mother was supposed to have died May 1967, the weekend she was supposed to meet me in New York City. But there's no record of death in the hospital. Yet the registration of death said she died. I'm going to give a little bit more here to give you, and I was able to locate the man at 87 years old who signed the registration of death. And there's a whole chapter about him in my book. He remembered my mother after all those years, out of all his patients. When my DNA test came back, there was lots of research, but the one thing that was very shocking was there were very few Canadians on. So this can't be me, this can't be mine. So I decided I better do 23andMe. I better do GenMatch. There's no way, because my aunts in Canada, except for my aunts in Canada, my grandmother, they all told me my father was Canadian from Vancouver, the West End. Well, it took until years, because I kept thinking my DNA is wrong. It's wrong. That my father was an American. Not only was he an American, but he lived in Denver, Colorado. It seems that him and his family did make frequent trips up to Vancouver. This is my grandmother, which I found several years ago. This is my Uncle Kenny's mother, which he knows, and this is the house, one of the homes that my uncle lived in with his biological father, that he didn't know was his biological father, because he thought his father was the lady, my grandmother. It was a little bit of a floozy. I don't know how else to say it. Oh. I dealt with a lot of reporters. Some believed me, some didn't over the years. Some took my story, some are still waiting for my story. So a lot of them are in my book because they're backing me up from the articles that they wrote about my mother. In 2016, I finally was able to reach out to James Dubrow. He's a researcher, author, organized crime. He's very big in Canada. He's extremely unbelievable. He's just an amazing human being. You get a chance, look him up. It was just wonderful experience meeting him. I met him when he was in Florida visiting. We met up, we talked, and I said, well, he writes all these books and he could do all this. And so maybe he should write my book. Well, when I was done with breakfast and after our conversation, no, you have to write your book. He says, because you're the only one that can write your book. And so I decided, I started to really get serious on it. I had been collecting things over the years, and I would ask Steve, can I do this? And we said, oh, I think you can, but we weren't sure yet, if I really wanted to do it, should I get another person to do it? And nah. So then I decided, you know what, I'm going to take my chances. I'm going to do it. It's a good story. I have a lot to tell. And every time another layer comes out, I think I'm done. It's like an onion. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think I'm done. And then something else pops up, or another person pops up, or another story pops up. This man on the right side, Dermot Travis, he sent me an email in 2017. I was living in Denver. I had a job transfer. It was either go to Denver or lose your job. I chose Denver. That's how I've been there before. It was Denver or Houston. I chose Denver because of my DNA of cousins. I did not know anybody, but a couple of cousins were out there and a close friend. Well, when Dermot reached out to me on an email on August 7th, 2017, he mentioned through that we had a mutual connection. See, Dermot was from Canada, Vancouver Island. He was the man who helped me find the story of my mother. He would look up, he had connections. He was a man of many hats. He was affiliated with Integrity BC, a non-government organization. He helped to restore accountability and transparency. He helped people. He gave his time. Weekly, he sent me emails or another suggestion on who my mother was and maybe who my father was. We were concentrating more on my mother. He exposed the corruption, and he tirelessly kept going until he found the truth. He was also very involved in helping Tibet families immigrate to Canada, and when he joined Integrity BC. I was unaware that he was ill during the whole time he was helping me. See, he never told me he was sick. He spent his time devoted to helping me. I had my own private investigator. He was a vital voice to Canada, but he was a vital voice to me. After that, I discovered during my year out in Denver, my cousin Eric reached out to me through an email and said we were cousins. It turns out Eric is not just my cousin. Eric is my grandmother's great-grandson and my Uncle Kenny's, that's his grandfather. So we see we're all connected. This is my paternity side. I got to meet Eric when I moved here in 2018. He was living in the area. Him and his son, he moved out of the area. He is now back in the area, so I'm very happy about that. I met my Uncle Kenny after a DNA test, and we had a lot of conversations. He was down in Florida visiting. He's from Elkhart and Indiana. And also, I forget where he is in Michigan. We can always ask him. I know he goes up to the lake there. I went down to Florida, spent a few days with him, and we connected, and we went over a lot of things, and he explained to me about his mother, my grandmother. He knew nothing about my father. So again, I still don't know who my father is. I had a lot of people do their DNA tests. I had a cousin do her DNA, and I'll say, one of these men here, one's my father and one is my uncle. My book is a testament. That's 29 years. It's under construction right now. I've worked on it for many years now, on and off. I was working full-time. Now I do some part-time work set privately. It's a true story. My family, my identity, which I lost the day in Las Vegas in 1993, when that man told me my parents weren't my parents. My identity was lost, but I am still strong in my faith, even though my DNA has lowered down to 10%. And I have a gentleman who, a doctor in town here, who actually wrote the foreword to my book. He could not make it tonight. And this is my family that I know. My family raised upper left-hand corner. This is my stepdaughter, Claire. She lives in Germany. This is my son and his wife, her mom and her sister and husband. And here, this is my best friend, Steve, and his husband, partner, love, friend. This is my brother who lives with me, who into 2018, he thought he was my brother. I have found his family for him, and he's reconnected with his sister, not his brother, but his sister, and they've been connected since 2019. They've been to each other's homes in Florida. They drove up here for his 75th birthday, so I'm very glad he had a good turnout. And then this is my family in Florida. My son's again in the back here. You see they're a little older. And then this here is Gatsby. I wanted just to thank you so much I appreciate all your support, your kindness, compassion, and it goes out to you. I appreciate. Thank you, Marcie, Beth, Jennifer, everybody. It's been great being with Happy Hour. I would like people to stay in touch, and when the book comes out, my publisher did call me tonight around 5 o'clock of all days, and she says it will be ready this fall. So I'm excited about that. Am I still good on time? Okay. I didn't know how fast I was going to be, so I kind of speeded it up a little bit because this is my first time doing this. But if you wanted to start asking me questions, I have notes. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, we can start the questions now unless there's, anything else you want to chat about before because once we start the questions, we'll stop the recording. So if there's anything that you want to share, like, I'm glad you've got your contact information up there so everyone can capture that.
Well, I would like to share too. I don't call myself a black market baby. I thought about that more. It's really, to me, it's baby laundering. That's in my own head. It's baby laundering, but I know they call it. I have several contacts in my book. People I've spoke to, Dr. Karen Balcom, she's in my book, and a couple of other people. So I also do have a reference sheet that I could add up if anybody wanted to read up on black market babies, because my book is very multifaceted. It's about a lot of different things, not just adoption, family, mystery. It does explain, I do have mafia ties in my book, and which was so opposite of how I was raised. But I just feel I'm a product of baby laundering. I kind of like that term more than black market babies. That's really so.
Okay, well, we can go ahead and Beth, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to say she might want to stop sharing so we can see the lovely Diana better.
Oh, please. How do you
There you go.
stop sharing? Did I stop sharing?
Not yet. Somewhere at the bottom it should say, I think along the bottom of your slide, what you're seeing.
Okay.
Not finding it?
All right, I'll oh, it went up here. Zoom share?
No.
No.
I can stop. How about if I stop it for you?
Okay.
Well.
Oh yeah, stop share. I got it.
Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Okay, good. Great, great, great.
I had notes, but I was getting a little sidetracked. I got a little excited, and I told you it's my first time doing this, and I don't mind saying.
You did a great job, just a great job. It's a fascinating story, and I'm excited for when the book comes out. So you're gonna definitely have to keep us updated on this. Sharing your story is just so important, and that's the main purpose of our platform this evening is to elevate those voices. And there's so many commonalities, but there's so many different twists in everybody's story, and it's just so important
I got
that
a lot of
we hear
twists.
your voice this evening. So we're excited about that. Yeah, writing a book, it's not for the weak. And we those of us that have written books understand that. So my hat's off to you.
Thank you. I
books in my
gotta
eyes
keep doing it until I felt I was getting it right,
Okay, so let's go ahead. Let me stop. Go ahead and stop the recording here.